Schoemann, and I just wanted to let you know we're going to take one more minute here just for anybody who's still logging in, and we'll get started here at about 1 minute past the hour. Thanks. All right, everybody. I think we're ready to start. So thanks again for joining us. My name is Chris Fabian, and I'm here with Josh Schoemann. We're actually together in Wisconsin, where we just launched Jefferson County today. And Josh joined us to make a speech about the Washington County experience as Jefferson County began their work. Today's webinar is actually a repeat of a presentation that Josh made at this year's Priority-Based Budgeting annual conference, our boot camp and summit. And the presentation was so good and so relevant to where many of the PBB communities are at. We asked Josh if he would be willing to make the presentation again for those organizations who weren't able to attend the PBB summit this year. So, Josh, thank you so much for being here. We're here in the studio, the PBB studio, and the show is yours. Take it away.
All right, thanks. It's good to be in the studio upper Midwest of PBB and have a chance to talk to you all today and give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the things we've been doing in Washington County and we've been sharing with people both at the conference and throughout the country and different opportunities. So thank you all for taking the opportunity to join and take a listen to some of the things we're doing. Hopefully you find some inspiration from some of the presentation today. And if you have any questions, you can see my Twitter handle, my personal Twitter handle is there on the slide right now. The Washington County Twitter handle is there as well. You're certainly welcome to follow us and send a direct message. You can always get a hold of me through email at Washington County as well. As you can see in the top right corner, really the theme of today is that priority-based budgeting is not just a program, it's a culture. And that's something that we've really driven home. I talked about it again today when we had the opportunity to partner with our neighbors in Jefferson County, Wisconsin. It's really something that we've ingrained into the organization. It's not just something that we programmatically check the list or check the box, but we talk, think, and act priority-based budgeting all the time. And it's something that I think we're pretty proud of. And as you can see from the title of the presentation, it's really taken us to this another level of priority-based budgeting, and specifically with this presentation talking about some of the shared services and regionalization and consolidation that we've done in the last 3 or 4 years since implementing priority-based budgeting. So just a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll talk just a little bit so you can give you context of Washington County. We'll talk about the fiscal health of Washington County as we walked into priority-based budgeting and why we felt there was a need for it, both at the administrative level and at the public policymaker level. We'll talk PBB and fiscal health driving public policy decisions. I'll dive a little bit into some of the specifics where we're actually asking the board to make decisions and tying it not only to priority-based budgeting, but specifically to our fiscal health gap, as we refer to it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. I'm back.
We'll also do a deep dive
Grab.
into some of our specific shared services, regionalization programs, and efforts that we've made, both with local municipalities as well as counties around us. And then just some opportunity for further discussion and Q&A. All of this is about leveraging all of the community resources, not just in Washington County, as you'll hear, but across Southeast Wisconsin for us, but also talking about how we work internally better. Today, we just had a department head meeting, for example, where we talked about we've been doing a lot of external shared services, regionalization, consolidation. How much internal talk are we having department to department? Is the Human Services Department talking to the Planning and Parks Department? Normally, those aren't things that you think about, but maybe a lunch is in order and just talking about what do you do? How does our aquatic invasive species program actually work, and does it have any impact on the things we do? Or are there lessons we can learn from the biology of what you do for the human side of what we do? So those types of things are really what the culture change is all about, and we'll talk about that today. So first, I want to give a shout out to our team at Washington County. These are the folks that made PBB into a reality. You can see their names there. I won't go through all of them. I will give a special shout out though to Aaron Dahl. At the time I gave this presentation in Denver, Aaron was one of our assistant finance directors. He is now our deputy human resources director as he's making his way through our organization, doing great things. And certainly to our county board supervisors. Tonight I have a county board meeting and are considering our 2019 budget. As I note there, we used to have 30, we now have 26. But certainly their leadership and their support is critical to making priority-based budgeting successful. So to all of them, to all the citizens of Washington County, we're very grateful. So a little bit about our financial climate in Washington County, particularly prior to implementation. We implemented, or at least began the process back in 2015. I became county administrator in January of 2014, attended the PBB conference out in Denver that summer, and it wasn't long thereafter that we began the process of implementing. So we're now on our third budget implementing PBB. But it all started back with some of the issues that some of you probably are very familiar with. I know this isn't unique to Wisconsin. I know there's other municipalities and counties throughout the country that are dealing with these types of state-imposed levy restrictions or tax rate restrictions, maybe state aid reductions, in some cases federal funding reductions. And of course, there's never any reduction in the mandate of service level that we provide. And we were experiencing all of those things. Currently in Washington County, what that tax levy freeze means for us is that we're only able to increase the amount of property taxes we collect in accordance with the amount of new construction there is in Washington County. So it doesn't matter if property values are rising necessarily, only if we see new construction. And most recently, that translates into something less than 500, or right around, I should say, $500,000 a year in new revenue on the property tax side. Of course, what you'll see in a few moments is the expenditure side is double or triple that in growth on an annual basis. And so that's where we begin to see our fiscal climate over the course of the next 5 years really being challenged. At the time that we started this process, Washington County did not have a formal strategic plan. We had a very thorough, comprehensive plan for the community, but not an independent strategic plan. So we used the opportunity of implementing PBB to leverage our vision, mission, and values, develop those for the first time, and then let that kind of set the tone for establishing result maps and implementing the rest of priority-based budgeting. We have had a history really of continued sound financial management. We are in very good shape with regard to our fund balances and have been for many, many years. I think I read a quote in one of the recent postings by PBB from Marathon County, something from the county administrator in Marathon about how I don't want anybody to think we're at a fiscal cliff, the sky is not falling, we're in great financial shape. This is about how do we maintain that for the next several years and next several decades. And that was exactly the situation in Washington County. And the other component, for those of you who don't know a great deal about Wisconsin, maybe you did hear about this. It was national news back in 2011. Governor Scott Walker at the time and the Republican legislature implemented what's commonly referred to as Act 10, which largely curtailed the collective bargaining ability of many public sector unions. And of course, that transpired and kind of was a slow bleed from 2011 through 2015. And it was getting to the point where even county board supervisors recognized that there was a real need to invest in human capital and the people that do the work that's so important to the citizens of Washington County. But the key with this, and this was one of the things that I took away from my experience at the conference in Colorado this past summer for PBB, was a note that Andrew Klein said. Andrew Klein did some awesome work out in the city of Baltimore. He's got a great book, City on the Line. If you have time, take a look at that. Even if you just take a look at it on Amazon or something like that, it's just really interesting to see kind of the framework of what some of the work they did. But he said very succinctly that strategic planning is critical. And that it kind of becomes the component for what I think they coined as outcome-based budgeting. And what I said following his presentation was that priority-based budgeting isn't a replacement for strategic planning. It's a support. It's a way to implement strategic planning. When we presented today in Jefferson County, they've got a strategic plan in place that they've had there for some time, and PBB really isn't intended, or at least I don't believe needs to, replace a strategic plan. I suppose there are components that could supplement or replace, but there's no need for that. It only should augment or support what your strategic plan ultimately is. To me, PBB is a tool of how you get the strategic plan accomplished. You cannot get a strategic plan done without having the right tools in place. As Jim Collins says, without having the right people in the bus in the right seats. And without getting super focused kind of on that hedgehog concept from that book, which I think is what strategic plans are supposed to be about, and certainly what priority-based budgeting makes happen. So for Washington County, here's just a kind of a quick, neat little snapshot that Aaron Dahl put together for us to kind of give a real simple citizen version of how is there a lack of balance in Washington County? Where's this gap coming from? And this is looking back now at 2018, and you can see that the expense side of the ledger grows at a clip. If you do really quick math there, you can see we're in that $1.5 million range. Of course, these are all assumptions. We're looking out 5 years and trying to figure out, what's the fiscal climate going to be in 2023. But on the right side, our annual growth in property taxes, those are pretty close to our actual. So in the 18, 637,000 is the actual that we collected, and sales tax was roughly 200. I've said earlier that we kind of shoot for that $500,000 range. We anticipate property taxes will increase roughly $500,000. So you're somewhere in that $700,000 to $850,000 expectation for annual revenue growth, at the same time as you're expecting costs to continue to the tune of $1.2 to $1.5 million, creating that $500,000 give or take differential, sometimes all the way up to $1 million difference, depending on the year. So when you look at what Washington County actually has, we have multiple versions of this graph, which shows our gap as we commonly refer to it. And this is one of the more rosy pictures. This is the one that our county board has asked us to go out and present on. When I first started presenting, we had closer to a $10 or $11 million gap. Some of that balancing act you saw a moment ago, I was a little bit more conservative with the expense numbers in my projections, a little more conservative on the revenue side, and the board really wanted us to tighten up and use closer to actuals. So what you're seeing here is essentially the best revenue collections we've had in 2017 and 2018 there. Those projections would have been the best we've had in over a decade. You can see it's an upward trajectory, which means we're planning that we continue to do the best we've ever done for the next few years. And the expense side, that slope is a little bit less steep than I think it could be. But you get the feel by looking at this graph that we're talking about roughly $1 million to $1.5 million per year that we've got to make up on an annual basis. So for us, you look at this graph, we had some of our own projections before bringing PBB in. They were similar, but not nearly as scientific. And it became blatantly obvious to us that there was a need for a new approach. We had tried the across-the-board cuts, telling the district attorney's office that he needs to do a 2% across-the-board cut, and let's all admit, what are we going to have a department like that cut? At some point, it's just people. Pencils and paper aren't realistic cuts anymore. So we've begun a mantra of doing less with less. From the very beginning of my tenure with the county, even before priority-based budgeting, but certainly in earnest with priority-based budgeting, began talking about doing less with less. We can't be all things to all people. We need to get priority focused, figure out what that hedgehog is, that big, hairy, audacious goal that we're going to go after, and really focus in on it and fund to it. And so I talk to people all the time in our organization about how we were going to, you may not be doing the same job today as you will be 5 years from now. We're going to try to keep all of our good employees in good positions. But that might mean today you're working in our planning and parks department, and tomorrow you're working in, again, our human services department or our highway department. And really tried to send that message of doing less with less. The days of more with less are gone. And now we're really to decision points. And so some of that priority-based budgeting process began really in earnest in April of 2015. We were ready to implement it in the summer of 15, and just the beginning to lay the groundwork for not only implementing this priority-based budgeting program, but also starting a new culture in Washington County. Another one of the presenters at the conference in Denver back this past August was Kirsten Wyatt from ELGL. And one of the things that she said at a different conference that I had picked up on was the importance of strategic plans, but how without budgets, they're really just dreams. If you've ever heard Dr. Nalbandian from the University of Kansas talk, he gives a real interesting analysis about how administrators or public servants are kind of the doers and public elected officials are the dreamers. And there's this gap between the doers and the dreamers, and strategic plans and budgets being the biggest policy document that we approve every year are kind of the how we close the gap, how we manage the gap between those two areas. So she had this really neat quote about strategic plans without budgets are dreams, and budgets without strategic plans are just spending. And I think it really drives home that need for thinking differently about how you're going to prioritize. We don't need to do everything we've always done. We don't need to do it the way we've always done it. But we do need to align our resources directly with what our priorities are. And the strategic plan lays out those priorities, and our budget tells us what resources we have, so we need to align them. So in 2015, for us, we went through that process, and on your right, you'll see the first iteration of our vision and mission and values for the organization. Just recently, and actually tonight, we're asking the board to give us our second version, now that we've gone through a lot of our kind of first, second, and third levels of PBB and strategic planning. We are now kind of to a graduated level of vision and mission, a much more clear and succinct version. But now, this was such a huge piece, a huge component of what made priority-based budgeting successful to us, because it really did lay that foundation for us of changing the culture in the organization. All of that was pointed to figuring out how we were going to manage that gap. As probably is the case with all of your organizations, we felt we were providing critical services to citizens up and down the organization, and just didn't have the resources to do it all as well as we would like. And so our first kick at the cat, if you will, was to try and look at, well, what's the low-hanging fruit? How do we get some small wins right off the bat, and then build on that? And that came in the form of taking a look at our quartile 4 programs, and specifically those that are non-mandated. Not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do, but we asked every department in the organization to take those quartile 4 programs, go to their committee and talk about, and specifically I should mention again, quartile 4 unmandated, non-mandated programs. Go to your committee and explain why we have those programs. Is there another way to do those programs? Can someone else do those? Can we create an alternative revenue source? Are they redundant within the organization? So that was kind of our first go at what are we going to do with all this data from priority-based budgeting? Again, trying to change the culture and get people to think differently. From there, it was about as many new ideas and plans for revenue sources as we could provide. We put difficult decisions in front of county board supervisors, asking them things like, should we be in the business of county parks? We have a lot of cities and villages in Washington County that have their own park system. The state has multiple parks in Washington County. Do we need to also provide that service? The answer was yes, but property taxes are not going to be the way we fund it anymore. So developing plans. You don't just go one day from funding a park system entirely from property taxes to the next day pulling that property tax out from under them. How are we going to develop a plan to move them from today's reality to tomorrow's reality? And then reallocate those resources to other priority areas. Another thing that we had were 2 challenges that the board wanted us to stay focused on. They developed for themselves a 5-year financial plan that we helped them author. And there were 2 key themes as we develop plans such as the Parks Fiscal Sustainability Plan, which I just mentioned. Number 1, they wanted to hold or reduce the property tax levy, the amount we collected. That was something that had been going on for years and years, where we weren't able to collect new money at all. In this case, they were saying, well, they changed their mind. We want to focus on the tax rate. If we can hold the tax rate, the amount that people are paying, and the levy's got to go up a little bit, then we're fine with that. And so we integrated that in our 5-year financial plan. The other thing that they decided to do was, for years and years, dating back to the late 90s, they had been utilizing their fund balance or their savings account, as I refer to it with citizens and the board, to backfill their budget on an annual basis. Sometimes they'd use it, sometimes they wouldn't, but they had planned to use it to the tune of almost $2 million every year dating back into the 2000s. And so we were going to eliminate that planned use of fund balance, because we knew someday there really might be a time when we need that. And then probably the biggest takeaway that we got from our policy discussions, and even implemented it, or integrated it, I should say, into our result maps, was seeking opportunities for collaboration and shared services, both within the county and outside the county. This has been hands down the most work, but we've decided that we were going to put a lot of time and effort into it because we see the largest impact. And as you'll see in some of the slides to follow, these are certainly some of the areas where we got the biggest bang for our buck, and probably in some cases took the biggest risks. So here you can see we not only talked about having shared services be something that we wanted to do. But we integrated it directly into our result maps that we developed with the help of Novak Consulting and the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting, ResourceX. So we took seek opportunities for collaboration and shared services with public and private partners. We put it directly into this document. We pulled it out of a strategic priorities document that we'd had in the past, which for us essentially was just a goals document. And we pulled it from there and highlighted it with the board members, and they believed so much in it that they wanted to integrate it here. What's kind of exciting and wasn't part of the August presentation, but I can tell you today, is that we took shared services and the results from PBB, and we have now integrated them directly into our comprehensive plan. So our strategic plan, our results map, and our comprehensive plan all tie together with our budget and our capital improvement plan. We've actually even structured the organization, though, so that we have a central services department where our planning staff works directly with and is now led by Jamie Ludovic, who was mentioned earlier in this presentation. And they are continually working on integrating and communicating on a priority basis. So furthermore, then we took the result maps, our strategic plan, and then we put it into our goals initiative, which we call strategic priorities for the quality of life of the citizens of Washington County. And this, as what you're looking at right now on this slide, is kind of the SMART goal that we put together for what shared services might look like. So for us, PBB level 4, kind of the mastery level of PBB, was how do we integrate shared services and make them happen, and then how do we hold ourselves accountable to a goal like this. And you can see on the bottom that our goal, I guess I better hurry up because I've got 14 days till December of 2018 to hit a minimum of $750,000 by the end of 19, that budget that's going to be passed tonight. Fortunately, we've done that, and I'll demonstrate that to you in a few minutes. But we, it's easy to laugh at ourselves and joke about it now, but when we developed these strategic initiatives back a couple of years ago now, in 2017 and even before, saying that we were going to hit $750,000 by the end of 19 was a little scary. We knew that there was some definite opportunities for collaboration, but to put ourselves out there and say, nope, you know what, we can hit 750,000, we felt was a bit aggressive and certainly risk-taking. So a lot of the things that we started to do once those initiatives were developed, the strategic priorities were set, the strategic plan was in place, the result maps were underway. Some of these things really already existed. And we needed to start to find where were we going to get partners to work with, how are we going to leverage our resources best. And you would think, logic for us seemed to push us to, well, let's go to the quartile 4 and quartile 3 programs. Those are going to be the easy ones. They're the low-hanging fruit. It didn't take us long to figure out that actually some of our best partnership opportunities are in some of our highest priority programs. And you'll see in just a few minutes that some of our biggest overlap we didn't have to go far. As a matter of fact, we could walk out of our front door and see that we're in the municipality of probably one of our best partners for some things. So eventually it started to be a kind of a mishmash of how do we just create conversations about where can we work together, and look at what programs do we have that might match up with other organizations. So here's a kind of a metric, or I should say a graphic that we utilize. We've implemented into a program that we call lead training, where we're training all of our mid-level managers, requiring them to go through this kind of to work themselves through the organization. But this is really the formula that we used, trying to get ourselves from that PBB implementation, when you finally finish that and everybody sits back and takes a breath and thinks about, oh man, this database is the coolest thing we've ever had. Now what the hell do we do with it? To starting to to go through the brainstorming of, all right, we've got these programs, and who around us has that? Is there another way for us to think about how we're going to fund these things? And ultimately hitting that norming stage. And this is the area that I think we're hovering in now and beginning to move into performing. And I started to talk about that back in August, and I really am starting to feel it more and more as we get farther along here. This is where PBB departs from the database and the program that you all implement or are thinking of implementing with Chris and Steve and Eric and the team, and you start actually taking it and making it into a reality, changing the culture of your organization. Go from that those conceptual ideas that you're throwing up against the wall to it's just how we talk. You come to our county board meeting tonight and you'll hear us reference the gap and fiscal health and shared services, and it just rolls off of the tongue because it's just how we interact with one another now. And we're just getting to that point of norming and into performing. Actually utilizing the fiscal health tool and talking about our gap to help our county board supervisors make decisions about where is the public policy of Washington County trending, and how do we use PBB to drive those policy decisions, and how do we use the priorities that we've established to help us stay focused on kind of that hedgehog concept of Jim Collins that I talked about before. So one of the big collaborations, probably the one that we got the most ongoing interest in and notoriety for, was when we kind of stepped out on the ledge, really took a leap of faith, and then integrated public health with Ozaki County, our neighboring county to the east. Prior to us doing this, there hadn't been another county-to-county merger of public health in the state of Wisconsin. There had been other cities that had merged, or city-to-county mergers, but this was the first of its kind in Wisconsin. And we leveraged an opportunity where Washington County actually had a vacancy in our public health director. That gave us the opportunity. Literally, Tom Moe, the county administrator of Ozaki County, and I were having coffee. Actually, I think we're having lunch, and we're just talking about, what could we work together on? And kind of organically, the public health department came up. I said, we have a vacancy. It might be an opportunity area. It looks like it's going to be one of those program areas that's kind of in the middle. It's a priority for us, but it certainly is something where we could see some collaboration on. And soon enough, we ended up formulating a plan. It took us the better part of 18 months to go through actually implementing it, including the need to go to the state legislature and change some state statutes to make it work. But in the end, it ended up saving us about $300,000 in the first year, and it's been pretty consistent in that $200,000 to $300,000 savings per year every year thereafter. So that in that first year, that first full budget was 2017, and we are now in the third full budget year of actually having this implemented, and we're again looking at that right about $250,000 in the savings for the 2019 budget. As you can see, it was an award-winning idea. It was something, again, it just came up as part of a conversation with our neighbors, which is how so many of these ideas come up. It really isn't about trying to cut or what are ways that we can do things differently, as much as it just is, this is what we do and this is what you do, and how can we work together? Kind of changing that context of looking internally only, and now the culture is, how can we work together, whether it's across department lines, municipal lines, or county lines. We also have other examples with other counties that we've done. Our medical examiner services are merged with our neighbor to the south in Waukesha County. They actually deliver to us the medical examiner services. They have three doctor level folks on their team, forensic pathologists that they have, that we in Washington County just don't have the resources to be able to afford even one forensic pathologist. But because of the partnership we were able to create with Waukesha County, and then adding another partner of Walworth County, who's just south of Waukesha County, now not only is Washington able to tap into the resources of one forensic pathologist, we now, between the three counties, have three forensic pathologists, delivering a significantly higher level of service than we would ever even be able to dream of having if we try to do something like that by ourselves. And then the aquatic invasive species coordinator position. This is a position that takes a look at lake health, inland lakes across Waukesha and Washington County. What's really special about this particular position, I mentioned to you earlier that Aaron Dahl, who helped create this presentation and do a lot of the work on PBB, actually moved now to Human Resources Deputy Director. And what's fun about this is now our aquatic invasive species coordinator, Brad Steckert, was with us today in Jefferson County, and he's now actually moved into that budget supervisor role that Aaron was in, formerly titled Assistant Finance Director. And now he's helping us implement priority-based budgeting and partnerships exactly like the one that he was part of with the AIS coordinator in Waukesha County. So it's, again, integrating further and further ingraining the culture change from where we were 5 years ago to where we are today in Washington County. Another one, as I mentioned a few moments ago, with the city of West Bend. The city of West Bend is the county seat of Washington County. When I said we could walk out the front door of the county courthouse and literally find a partner just by looking out the door, the city of West Bend has been that partner. And we actually brought together, this becomes not only a public-private partnership, but also a public-private partnership with QuadMed. QuadMed is an organization that is a sister company or maybe a daughter company of Quad Graphics, major printing private sector entity in not only in Washington County, but in Wisconsin and across the country, one of the leading printers in the nation. And they have this QuadMed organization that they use for on-site medical service for themselves and ultimately spun off their own company. They're now partnering with West Bend and Washington County. We have a clinic right inside the county courthouse that is servicing both City of West Bend and Washington County employees. And we're estimating by the end of the third year that we'll save about $1 million. We invested a couple $100,000 to outfit the clinic to get that up and running. We're to the break-even point already, and we've only had it up and running for just over a year. And from here on out, we're expecting some significant cost savings, which wouldn't be possible to the degree that we expect without the city of West Bend. And what's more exciting for me is, as a county, we were able to reach out to our partner in West Bend, who were told on multiple occasions that they just didn't have the ability to do this kind of a thing on their own. They just weren't a big enough organization. So we were able to work together to leverage economies of scale and produce some serious taxpayer savings, which we were able to, certainly reallocate to other areas and other priorities in both organizations. Kind of a double win for taxpayers in the city of West Bend. A couple of other programs that I think have been just worth noting, and certainly if you want, you can get this presentation or double check back on this webinar later, but Child Advocacy Center, there's many of them popping up across the country. This is one that we were able to kick off with a partnership between Ozaukee and Washington County, our neighbor to the east. It's now a three county program with our joint neighbor to the north in Sheboygan County. Again, we wouldn't, no one county could have afforded to have a child advocacy individual on our team by ourselves, let alone have a child advocacy center. Now, because we were able to pool our resources, find this as a high priority for the county, and then delegate resources that way, we were able to make it happen for all three counties. And then the UW extension, this is really something that's not only Washington County, but the University of Wisconsin system as a whole has been reorganizing and trying to find ways to be a little bit more efficient. Some of you from Wisconsin are certainly aware of this, but if you're not from Wisconsin, you might know or may have heard that the university is a larger system than just UW-Madison, but it saw a significant cut in its state funding, and so they've been looking for different ways to do things. One of the things that they do is they put educators in each county through the UW extension, and we are now working with a 4-county consortium rather than individual county by county. In addition, in Washington County, we have a 2-year campus formerly referred to as the UW Colleges, and they're now merging with one of the 4-year institutions just down the road in Milwaukee. And so now we're able to tap into some of the resources of a Tier 1 research university at UW Milwaukee and bring those out to West Bend and Washington County. And we're pretty excited about that and looking to invest in it a little bit further. One of the last and probably one of the biggest splashes we made, and I think one of the things that's really resonated with our team and with our board, was a letter that we sent out back in July of 2017 to each of our surrounding counties, asking them to engage with us to investigate this Counties Without Borders effort. And really what we were saying to them is, all the things that I started off with, how the state funding has kind of dwindled, property taxes look like they're kind of going to be stagnant for the next few years, and that the climate, at least the forward-looking climate, is grim looking for local government in Wisconsin, not just for counties. And so we asked them to partner with us, do some strategic planning together, and talk about how we might collaborate up to and including merging counties. And so I've had some lessons learned for myself. Don't start with the biggest thing possible, because you might scare some people. And we did that, but it has certainly resulted in some wins and some conversations that we wouldn't have had otherwise, including some current conversations about other departments or divisions that we might be able to talk about sharing or collaborating on, even if it's not directly sharing. And so my warning to you is don't feel like you have to go big. You don't have to change the world. Those small wins are very, very important because that they build. On the other hand, I don't think we would have gotten some of the wins that we got in recent months if it wasn't for sending out this letter either. So I'm a big believer in no regrets in life, but I might have handled it slightly differently, but this was certainly one of those things that put us on the map of saying, there's a real issue out here. I go to county association meetings now and other similar meetings with my peers, and they know that I've been pounding the drum for months, and really for 5 years that I've been at the county. They know that we're serious about consolidations and shared services and collaboration, and we're not afraid to talk about it. So there's a lot of unique things going on across the country. If you're interested in learning more about them, the state of New York has some really fascinating things that Governor Cuomo is doing out there. But this was one of those that I think put us on the map in Wisconsin, above and beyond what we've been doing with priority-based budgeting. And although it was out there and certainly taking a risk, it's definitely consistent with our priorities, our values, and consistent with the culture change that we've been making in Washington County. A couple of smaller things that we've been doing in our parks. I talked about a little bit earlier, our parks fiscal sustainability plan. Here's a couple of things that we've worked with Waukesha County on doing. They've been doing beer gardens. Surprise, surprise, Wisconsin likes beer, and people were willing to drink it anywhere, including our parks. So we captured that opportunity and looked at working with Waukesha County, who already had an arrangement down there. And then we actually created a couple of days this year, Mother's Day and Father's Day, where Waukesha County to our south has a park entrance fee, and we do. we actually had a reciprocity where if you had a sticker for Waukesha County, you could come up to Washington for the day, and vice versa. So Mother's Day, if your parents live down in Menominee Falls or Waukesha, go down there, take your Washington County sticker, and go enjoy the county park, and same to the north here in Washington County. So just kind of small but fun ideas like that we've been looking at and continue to look at. I'll let you read the radio system alignment. That was another small victory, but the one I want to dwell on is how we achieved that big, hairy, audacious goal that you saw before. The $750,000 savings actually translated into about $5 million by working with a number of our local municipalities and the state of Wisconsin on simply transferring jurisdictional ownership of some of the roads, which has been on the docket dating back as far back as the 1980s. And finally getting those transfers to happen actually significantly saved money for a number of our municipalities and the state of Wisconsin, and resulted in us getting a check next year for $5 million. So this was a fun partnership. Took a long time. We just dried the ink on the agreements themselves. We've actually got some annexations that need to happen to finalize them. But we're talking about over 13 miles of road that were transferred among 7 partners, including the state and the county. There's a stretch of about 5 miles of state highway that the county took over and then turned around and transferred parts of it for some local control, which some of our local towns and cities were asking for. And then we also transferred some section of road, county road, and even some municipal road over to the state of Wisconsin. So it sounds like it's a little bit of a shuffle, but in reality, by changing the level of mandate for the type of work that has to happen on those roads, the county's got a certain level that we sustain. If we transfer that down to the town, it's a lower level that's a little bit less expensive to maintain. We took some of the state roads. By us taking those roads, we're able to do them again at a little bit lower level, and frankly at a cheaper level. We don't have quite the same bureaucratic red tape that they've got to go through, and some of the red tape from the feds that they've got to go through. At the same time, we were able to transfer some roads over to the state that made sense for their transportation system in order to make their system work more effectively, and that was the case on our side too. It just made sense. And so at the end of the day, we're going to net out. We'll take some of that $5 million, give some to the local municipalities who are going to pick up some mileage, also do some improvement to our roads. But we're going to net out somewhere in that $2 to $2.5 million range in actually cash on hand that we'll be able to turn around and put into other priorities in the county. But all of that started with a conversation with one of our local municipalities, a small township, rural township, that wanted to have some local control over their roads. And we were trying to figure out how to make it work. And we said, it was my highway commissioner and I sitting in a room saying, if we're going to give them a couple miles of road, what do we need to get in return to make this work? They don't have money. They can't give us cash. So how do we make this thing go? And one thing after another, pretty soon it was 7 municipalities who we knew all of these pieces people had been wanting to make them happen for years. But how do we actually make it happen? Now we've got the priorities to point to. This is something we want to do. We've got a board that's saying, let's do shared services. Let's take the risks. And this was one of them. And it ultimately resulted in a huge 7 times win. Hopefully I said that enough times. That resulted in some positive things for each one of the municipalities. So just some final thoughts on some of my observations and discussions, lessons learned, if you will. Everything's on the table. That road transfer, that's a high-level service, certainly a mandate of sorts. But don't be afraid to include things like that, to think about all of the opportunities. If you have ideas that make sense, and you're open to the possibility of making change, and even going to the highest levels like we did with the health department to make a change in the law, if you're willing to go through those types of things, in order to make your fiscal sustainability a reality, and it makes sense, people will listen and you can do it. Don't automatically exclude those types of mandated services. And sometimes you'll go through all these exercises and you're going to find out, you know what, this isn't going to save money, but maybe it actually improves services for citizens. Maybe it provides stability to a program that otherwise was unstable, whether that was because of personnel issues, you didn't have enough resources to have enough personnel, or maybe it's a financial issue in the department. Sandy Spang from the city of Toledo talked about that in detail back when we were in Denver this August. Not every issue when you're dealing with priority-based budgeting is about money. Sometimes it's about what's the priority and how do we get better, maybe without spending more money. And a lot of times what I found is doing it together, you can spend the same amount of resources, but get a much bigger bang for your buck. If you ever read Good to Great, you've heard that philosophy of the flywheel, getting the flywheel going or moving, and once it's moving, it's going on its own. Using the data for PBB is really what helps kind of get the flywheel moving. I think it's what greases the wheel, if you will, to get it moving and enhance negotiation. It certainly got staff on our end to think differently. It changed that culture. It got individuals to look not just at, I'll use an example from our Aging and Disability Resource Center. They used to have a senior conference that they presented. They always looked at it as a moneymaker. When they went through the priority-based budgeting process and they actually started doing cost allocation of people's time, they realized not only were they not making money, they were costing about $16,000 a year, if I remember right, to actually do that program. And so they ended up stopping it. They tried to give it to some nonprofits for them to run it, but they decided it just wasn't worth the time where they were losing money, and those resources got diverted to actual programs out in the field for citizens. So sometimes it's not going to work, but you got to get people thinking and just a little bit differently than they've ever thought before. Again, I think small wins are a big deal. You've heard for the last few minutes, last half hour or so, about the wins in Washington County. Some of them are really big, but those small wins are important to getting people to the point where they can actually believe in what you're doing. And as those small wins accumulate, they're going to gain support from people, and you're going to be able to get to the big wins. And finally, not all ideas work out. We had a veteran services retirement. Our veteran services officer retired. We talked about doing that with Ozaukee County. And at the end of the day, we just decided, you know what, we want to have our own, they want to have their own, and that's okay. And so we'll find resources to make it work. Not every single one of your ideas is going to work. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do them, and you certainly shouldn't be afraid to try. So that's my presentation. I thank you for the opportunity. Hopefully you learned a little something today about some of the chances to take your organization to level 4 priority-based budgeting. Again, our Twitter handles are there on the bottom. Feel free to follow and direct message if you have any questions. And hopefully have a great day. Thanks again.